like in my role as an associate editor, I truly felt like I was bringing the voices of nurses who were new to oncology or new to writing forward. I was able to provide a venue for those oncology nurses who also wanted to bring forward some of the cool quality improvement projects that they were working on. I was really happy to share that knowledge through this role and so that all the other institutions can learn and maybe implement some of those solutions.
You're listening to the Oncology Nursing Podcast, where ONS Voices talk cancer, a resource from the Oncology Nursing Society. Through conversations with subject matter experts, we examine the important issues in oncology nursing, from new treatments to patient-centered research to advancements in clinical practice. Join us as we hear from nurses in all facets of oncology care, from bench to bedside and everywhere in between. Welcome to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. Hello, and welcome to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. I'm your host, Jaime Weimer, Manager of Oncology Nursing Practice at ONS. And today we're talking with Megha Shah, Charge Nurse at Northwestern Medicine Cancer Center, Delnor in Geneva, Illinois, about her experience volunteering as a peer reviewer and associate editor for the Clinical Journal of Oncology Nursing, one of ONS's journals. As a reminder, you can earn free NCPD contact hours after listening to this episode and completing the evaluation we've linked in the episode notes. Welcome and thanks so much for joining us today, Megha.
Thank you for having me, Jaime.
So you have served as an associate editor and you currently volunteer as a peer reviewer for the Clinical Journal of Oncology Nursing, which many know as CJON. Let's start with that and with your experience as an associate editor. Can you give us an overview of what you did in that role and how long you served?
Let me first start out by explaining that there are different departments or columns, you can say, that you can volunteer to be an associate editor for. Every issue of the CJON includes articles from each of these departments. For example, a DNP project department that is a department that highlights different DNP projects submitted by oncology nurses from all over the United States. I chose to be an associate editor for the clinical moment column. I chose this department because this was my first experience of being an associate editor. The column required writers to include a short 500 count article about anything related to oncology nursing clinical setting. The prerequisite to be an associate editor for this column is that you need to be working in oncology setting as a nurse and have a bachelor's degree in nursing. So that's easy. In the role of being the associate editor for the clinical moment department of CJON, I was responsible for coordinating and editing articles on an every other month basis. So it wasn't even every month. I was responsible for finding authors, providing support to the authors during the writing process, editing the articles based on the guidelines provided by CJON, and submitting the articles to be reviewed by the editor of the journal within the deadlines that were set forth by CJON. This role also involved having conference calls with other associate editors and the editor to basically see what the topics everyone is working on in their departments, that there is no overlap, and to provide support to one another if someone is struggling to find topics or authors. And then your next question was, how long did I serve in this role? So I served from 2020 to 2023.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for describing that for me and for our listeners. I appreciate how you shared that there are obviously some requirements, some eligibility requirements, but that they're not all unattainable. I think that might be an assumption that others might make of, I could never be an editor. I don't have the right qualifications. And as you shared, there are opportunities for all various levels of experience and educational preparation. So I think that's important to keep in mind. I also like how you shared that you have support, right? You're not on an island by yourself. You are a part of a team with the other associate editors as well as the main editor. And there is that regular touch point and support for you as you support the authors in your column. So thank you for sharing that.
Correct. You have a lot of support, even for peer reviewing and for associate editing, especially for being an associate editor. You have other associate editors on the conference calls, which happens every about 3 months. They help you, basically you submit what you've been working on, what's the upcoming topics that you're working on. So you're not all working on the same topic at the same time, or if you're struggling with something, they're always there to help you.
Well, now let's pivot a little bit to your role and your experience as a peer reviewer. Can you describe what that experience was like and how long you've been in that role?
So as a peer reviewer, my role includes reviewing the articles and the scripts that are written by other authors in oncology nursing for quality and relevancy. And then I score them based on this criteria. After I am completed with the scoring, I submit the peer-reviewed article to the editor of CJON. During this peer reviewing process, the articles that I receive to review are based on the subjects that I've already pre-selected, that I feel comfortable with and have expertise to review. So they don't give you or have you review articles that you're not comfortable with. And you can also deny if you don't have time at that time when you're given an article and say that, can I do it next month? Or can you give me another article? You have that flexibility. The identities of authors are not disclosed to the peer reviewers, and the identities of the peer reviewers are not disclosed to the authors. This is important to avoid implicit bias. And how long have I been in this role? So I've been in this role on and off since, I would say, 2021.
Wonderful. And thanks for giving just a little bit of peek and insight to kind of what that process has evolved. We'll go into a little bit more detail here in just one moment. I think you have shared your experience as a peer reviewer and acknowledged that it is something that has flexibility. It is something that allows you to stay connected to the work at ONS, at CJON, at the Clinical Journal of Oncology Nursing, and also if it's sort of within your life. So as you mentioned, if you've got a crazy month, you're in school, your family, something's happening, it is a commitment that can be flexible along with the regular life that you have to live.
I agree.
So let's talk a little bit more about the actual peer review process. I think it's important, and it's not maybe something that all of us, unless we've done it or we've gone through it because we've submitted our own articles, I don't know that it's something we completely understand. So talk us through what that peer review process is. How long does it take to complete a full peer review of an article?
So I usually receive invitations. You get approximately between 3 to 5 articles to review in a year, which is not bad at all. You receive invitations to review an article. You have an option to either accept that invitation or decline that invitation if you have other things going on in your life, like you mentioned. Then I review this article for relevancy and accuracy, score the article, provide detailed comments and feedback on sections that need improvement or the sections that look wonderful and can go straight to publishing. After that, I submit the article to the editor. And again, you have to meet the deadlines that are given. So I would say an article on an average takes me about 1 to 2 hours to review, which is not bad. And you're given about 3 or 4 days to review an article. So it's very attainable.
Wonderful. Thank you for explaining that. I think, again, it gives insight for those that are interested in publishing, just understanding kind of what that process involves. It shouldn't be scary. I don't think it's scary. Feedback's a gift, right? It's learning how your article is perceived by peers, which is a very important step, and also getting recommendations for how to make it even better. So thank you for your role in that, because I think it's what makes our journal so great. So how did you find out about these two various volunteer opportunities, and what made you want to apply?
So I found out about the volunteer opportunities like any other volunteer opportunities with ONS. ONS has a great volunteer website, and they have all the listings, the requirements on that website of what each volunteer opportunity consists of, what the requirements are, how much time commitment is required. So I found the way to apply for this on that website. And then ONS also sends weekly emails with listings of volunteer opportunities. So I usually keep an eye on those too. I love to click, and I'm a clicker.
Absolutely. And we will include a link to where those volunteer opportunities are housed. They are actually part of our ONS Communities website. So we'll make sure to include a link to that in our episode notes today. So what made you want to apply when you saw those opportunities?
So I'm always interested in learning new things, especially in oncology nursing. I wanted to learn how to be an associate editor and a peer reviewer, so I applied. Honestly, I wasn't expecting to be picked for the associate editor position because I did not have any prior experience when I applied. But then soon after I applied, I got a call from the editor of CJON that she has reviewed my resume. She reviewed my application, and she would love for me to join the team. So she couldn't see me on the call, but I was jumping up and down.
Well, that's wonderful. I know we talked about this a little bit, but just to revisit both of these different opportunities kind of side by side, can you run through again the qualifications and the experience that were required both for the associate editor and the peer reviewer position and just kind of how they differed?
So to be an associate editor for the clinical moment column of CJON, you have to be a bachelor's prepared nurse. But besides that, for that particular column, there are no other qualifications. But if you want to be an associate editor for a department such as, the DNP project department that I was talking about earlier, it is preferred that you're either a nurse with a PhD or a DNP, just so that you know what you're reviewing or what you're editing. And then to be a peer reviewer for CJON, all you need is to be an experienced oncology nurse. They prefer you have a master's or higher degree, but it's not a requirement.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Again, I think it's important for people to not assume that they're not qualified. There are many volunteer opportunities. I know we are trying to create more of those opportunities here at ONS of various lengths of time, depths of involvement, different types of projects. And so we would encourage everyone to continue to watch for those opportunities to come up because we can't do anything that we do without the help and support of our wonderful members and volunteers. So can you describe for our listeners, what was that application process like? And what was the follow-up? And were there any other additional requests, interviews, things like that? How are those two processes similar or different?
So the application process for me for both the roles, I felt like was very easy. I applied, like I said, through that ONS volunteer website, which you'll see in the notes, and was asked questions regarding my experience, such as how many years of experience I have as an oncology nurse, if I held any certifications, and the areas that I have expertise in, such as medical oncology, neuro-oncology, etc. Then I was asked to submit my resume, and that was it. I felt like the only difference between the application process, or I guess the follow-up process for associate editor and the peer reviewer position, was that once I was deemed as a potential candidate for the role for the associate editor, the editor called me and explained me the role for the position, whereas for the peer reviewer, I received a congratulatory acceptance email for the role.
Great. So sounds like fairly painless, very smooth. And that's, of course, what we aim for when we are working with, selecting, and communicating with our volunteers. So I'm glad to hear that that experience went well for you.
It was very smooth.
So certainly volunteering your time, your skills, adding your perspectives into these types of roles. This is a way for any nurse to give back to their greater nursing community. And I know as an oncology nurse myself, I think we are very passionate and we want to make our community as good as we can. In your view, what influence, what effects do you feel that your role serving as peer reviewer and associate editor, what influence did it have on ONS and our profession as a whole?
I feel like in my role as an associate editor for the clinical moment column of CJON, I truly felt like I was bringing the voices of nurses who were new to oncology or new to writing forward. I became an associate editor during the times when the COVID pandemic was at its worst. Oncology nurses during that time felt like they needed a venue to bring some of the issues of how to care for immunocompromised oncology patient population during the pandemic forward. I felt like CJON empowered me to give myself and other frontline oncology nurses a venue to bring these issues forward and also to bring solutions to some of these problems to the forefront. I was able to provide a venue for those oncology nurses who also wanted to bring forward some of the cool quality improvement projects that they were working on, some of the solutions that they had developed in their workplace or settings. And I was really happy to share that knowledge through this role, through this position, so that all the other institutions can learn and maybe implement some of those solutions. I felt like I was rewarded throughout my term as an associate editor and was actually kind of sad to leave. In my role as a peer reviewer, though, as I mentioned before, the identities of both the parties are not disclosed. So I truly feel like I'm contributing my expertise as an oncology nurse by providing feedback on relevant, current, and upcoming topics in oncology nursing.
Wow. And what a pivotal time you were serving as that associate editor. Thank you for that. As you said, that was really a really important time to ensure that what we were able to publish in CJON was meeting the needs of nurses in a very pivotal time, lots of upheaval and lots of unknowns. So thank you, especially thank you for that.
Thank you.
So what effects do you feel like serving in these roles had on you, both personally and professionally?
Boy, was I glad to be an associate editor. You have no idea. So personally, I felt rewarded being an associate editor. I felt like I was bringing great topics in oncology nursing forward. And like I said, I was able to provide venue for all these oncology nurses across the United States that wanted to say things and write different cool topics. And I was able to bring those forward. But professionally, this experience helped me write my papers during my DNP school like no other. My husband thinks that I can write papers while I'm sleeping. So I think that that really helped me. But in workplace setting, I feel like I can lead quality improvement projects or evidence-based projects or research projects with this experience under my belt. I feel like I can lead these projects now with ease. And I think it's a great experience to have professionally and personally.
That's really, really wonderful to hear. In your opinion, what skills or qualities do you think would help a nurse be successful at serving as peer reviewer or associate editor?
I feel like a nurse should potentially have at least 5 years experience in oncology nursing to be successful as a peer reviewer or an associate editor. And then I feel like in this day and age of technology, an oncology nurse interested in becoming an associate editor or a peer reviewer should have experience with Microsoft Word, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, all these online platforms of communication and the things that you need to submit and edit those articles with. And then I feel like the nurse should be also organized and be able to multitask to meet those deadlines, which I feel like that's just inbuilt in all the nurses anyway. So that's what counts.
It's just part of baked into our DNA already.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give nurses who are considering volunteering either as a peer reviewer or as an associate editor for our ONS journals?
I would say just try it. Just try it. Have fun. It's rewarding. And I promise it will help you at some point in your career or your personal life, whether you're helping to lead a project at work or helping your child to write a paper for school. It's going to come in handy. I promise you.
Well, Megha, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experiences as an associate editor, as well as a peer reviewer working with CJON, one of our journals here at ONS. As we wrap up our episode today, we do like to run through a series of quick fire questions to help summarize what we talked about and to pull out some key points. To start that off, in roles such as peer reviewer or associate editor, how can healthcare professionals evaluate their implicit or hidden bias during their service in these roles?
I feel especially being an associate editor or a peer reviewer for professional journals, especially journals related to oncology nursing, such as CJON, I feel like you really have to keep your emotions, your personal feelings, and your opinions in check. While editing or reviewing an article, you should always remain factual and keep the literature focused on evidence. The great part about this process, I feel like, is that the work that you submit as an associate editor or a peer reviewer gets reviewed by the editor herself and many other behind the scenes teams before it gets published. So if by any chance, by accident, if there is implicit bias introduced in your literature that you're submitting, then it can be addressed before it gets published. But sometimes the topics that come your way that you're writing about can make you feel like you want to interject your emotions, but you got to keep those in check because these articles do get published and they have shelf life of 5 years. So
what are some common misconceptions about volunteering as a peer reviewer or an editor?
I feel like one of the biggest common misconception is it's a lot of work and it's boring. That's what I hear some of the nurses say. I disagree with that. I feel like it's a lot of fun and it's rewarding and it's a great opportunity. I feel like everybody should try it.
What's something about this topic that's not often discussed, but you wish people knew more about?
The process of application. I feel like that's not discussed often. It's not a 4 or 5 page application process. It's a 4 or 5 question application process. It's very easy. Go to the website and just try applying for one of the positions.
What additional training or education do oncology nurses need if they want to serve as a peer reviewer or an associate editor?
None. Just bring your experience and expertise.
That's the perfect answer. That's my favorite answer we've ever gotten to that question, I think. What are some additional resources for professionals who want to learn more about peer reviewing or serving on research journal editorial boards?
For CJON, I feel like, or any publication related to oncology nursing, ONS has great resources. So when you go to ONS website, you go into the publication section and you click on CJON, then there's a whole section for authors and peer reviewers, which has great information on how to go about doing submitting and what are the time requirements and such. So I suggest for everyone to check it out.
Well, thank you again, Megha. It's really been great to talk with you and hear about your experiences serving as a volunteer in these two very unique but very important roles. Do you have any final comments to share with our listeners today?
I hope every oncology nurse tries to apply for a volunteer position with ONS at some point in their career. It's fun, it's rewarding, and I want to thank you, Jaime, and the ONS team for having me on this podcast.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megha.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Oncology Nursing Podcast. Tell us about your favorite part in this episode by leaving a review wherever you download your podcast. For more resources and information about oncology nursing, visit us at ons.org or voice.ons.org. The ideas and opinions shared in this episode represent those of the guest and not necessarily ONS.